We are working today in the historic Lithuanian district of Waterbury, Connecticut, and it is one of best surviving such districts. There is the oldest Lithuanian church in New England here, also a Lithuanian school. And we are together with Christian Allyn, who has recently discovered the Lithuanian heritage of this area. So could you tell us more about the history of the Lithuanian district here?
Certainly. So most Lithuanian settlements predating Waterbury were in Pennsylvania. And the first Lithuanian to settle in Waterbury was from Pennsylvania. And from their settlement here to work in the brass industry, which was much more desirable than working in the coal fields of Pennsylvania, many Lithuanians from that area started to migrate here. This neighborhood that we're walking in, Brooklyn, wasn't built until the 1860s. And we're coming up upon soon the oldest house in the neighborhood, which was built in 1868 directly across the street from the school. The neighborhood was called Brooklyn because there was predominantly Irish immigrants that first settled here, and then Lithuanians from the Williamsburg, Brooklyn area near Annunciation Parish. The first waivers from Lithuania largely came from Vilkaviškis as well as Dzūkija, which is where both of my family lines trace back to. The first waivers largely married off into different ethnicities and moved out of the neighborhood starting in the 40s. The older section of the neighborhood, which is downhill of the school and church, is the original settlement. And then as further houses were built uphill, starting in around 1920 and onward, the quality of the houses increased. They were largely three families built by a Lithuanian contractor named John Statkus. And then thereafter, after World War II, the development transitioned into early single-family ranch-style houses, and the DPs largely moved into this area.
And so this is a Lithuanian school of
yes.
parish. Yeah,
so the first church opened on this site in 1894.
First Lithuanian church, yeah.
Right. It was a wooden church. And shortly thereafter, 10 years later in 1904, this brick church that we're looking at was built. In 1912, there was a brick school that was built across the street from the church on Congress Avenue. The original church building was transitioned into a school temporarily in advance of building this building in 1925.
And so later this district, as I understand, Lithuanians moved out from this district about 1960s, 1970s,
yes.
1980s. So the building survived. People still come to the Mass, but most Lithuanians don't live here anymore, yeah?
Yes, the beginning of the decline started in 1955, where there was a flood caused by two hurricanes that summer. The flood very much negatively affected what's known as the Naugatuck Valley of Connecticut along the Naugatuck River, which Waterbury is a part. So the downhill section of this neighborhood was severely flooded. The commercial district where the highway was today was extremely damaged. And there was a developer that purchased a lot of those buildings around that time. And the last building that was built here was the parish center, which you see behind us, which we walked past, in 1962. Right around that time were the reforms of Vatican II. The interior of our church was renovated, removing a lot of the original Lithuanian designs, and the highway was built the same year. So that entire commercial district was demolished. The residential area, which we're walking through, and that continues up here, was left intact. And everything from that point on has generally stayed the same. The neighborhood, as older generations passed away, declined. But what we're witnessing here now is that the real estate environment in the surrounding counties, especially Hartford, Fairfield, and Litchfield County, has increased so much that there's a lot of middle-income families moving into New Haven County, which is Waterbury is a part. And a lot of the old mill buildings that were decrepit for decades have either been torn down by the partners of the city or have burnt down. So that blight has largely been removed, and there's an opportunity for investment here. The St. Patrick's Church, which is the Irish church that predates St. Joseph's, was recently acquired by the Institute of Christ the King, which is an order dedicated to the Latin Mass. And just yesterday, there was a procession of over 150 people from that parish to St. Joseph's, which was an incredible sight to see. And it was incredible to see a Latin Rite consecrated host transported to our church in a monstrance into our tabernacle for the first time in 60 years.
Indeed, we have participated yesterday, and it was a very nice ceremony. Among things that unfortunately burned down here, it was also a Lithuanian club in the nearby street. But we are impressed to see that many Lithuanian things remain here, like, for example, Lithuanian flags here, because it's probably the only Lithuanian district that I see still has like Lithuanian flags lined along the street here. And it's also very interesting for us to hear this history told to us by a person younger than us, because usually it's not that way. So how old are you, and how did you get interested into this Lithuanian district of your ancestors?
Yep, so I am 28, and so I was born in 1994. And 1994 was a symbolic year of Lithuanian history because it was the first year where the Russian army was completely out of Lithuanian territory. And so my grandmother was half Lithuanian, half Slovak-Hungarian, and they owned a couple of businesses here in Waterbury and in Torrington, Connecticut. And my father's side is Old English as well as a little bit of Irish and French Canadian, but primarily descended from some of the founders of Connecticut and the founders of the United States of America. So we have a house in Canaan and family land, which has a variety of houses of different family members. So history was always very close and near and dear to our family. But something that always bothered me was the blight and decay of Waterbury and the Lithuanian heritage here. I always saw the Lithuanian side as the side that suffered the most, and therefore, being raised Catholic, the side that I should revere and respect the most. So I always loved my hometown of Canaan, and I went to UConn, the University of Connecticut, got a horticultural and resource economics double major, wrote the Town Plan of Conservation Development, which is a plan that every municipality in Connecticut is required to have, ran for selectman, and I'm still a selectman in North Canaan. And while I was at UConn, I also started my invasive plant consultation removal business, which now is increased to a payroll of 8, and I work with a variety of subcontractors across the state. So during the COVID pandemic, there was a lot of people in Canaan in that area that were passing away, whether from COVID or from diseases related to COVID because they weren't going to the doctor and they were isolated. So I had this experience the night where 3 people in my life passed away on one night. And I was asking myself, I was very successful at that stage of life and still am, but there was something missing. And the answer to that was being Lithuanian, which is a surprise to me. I've been to Lithuania. I went in 2017 with my grandmother. I've always loved the culture, but I never thought I could have the ability to express that here in the United States in the Lithuanian neighborhood, let alone where my family came from in Waterbury. That same month when I had that revelation, which was February of 2021, I went down to visit my grandmother, and she told me, I'm selling my house in Florida. We went to Florida, and you could have anything you want. And I took all of the Lithuanian heritage and anything she had of the family history. And some of those things you'll see later today. Unique, one-of-a-kind photos of this neighborhood, and people long gone by, businesses that were here, that sort of thing. And I was just compelled by that history, and knowing what I had done in Canaan, restoring that town, thought I could begin to do the same thing here. So December of 2021, my grandmother was visiting from Florida. My brother, who's a U.S. Marine, was visiting from Hawaii. And my parents and I all came here for Epiphany Sunday Mass. We had tried going earlier that time during their visit. They were here for a month. But what was interesting is we could only go that Sunday. There was a blizzard. There was all these things that were blocking us. But lo and behold, almost all of my Lithuanian ancestors passed away on the Epiphany. So there we were. It was a day of passing for us. You know, our ancestors would pass on that day. And now for me, it was a day of a true epiphany, a revelation. And so I came here and saw that the church had about 50 Lithuanians in it. And I said, there's a real community here. Something can happen. Shortly thereafter, Lithuania opposed China on their stance on Taiwan, which I saw as heroic. And one of the Chinese premiers said that Lithuania belongs in the dustbin of history. And I said, wow, what of all times for someone to say that? Right now, while I'm going through this revelation, I have to dig down. And if I have to be a martyr like our Lithuanian ancestors who were brought to Siberia and killed by the Soviet Union, I'll do it. And I joined the Knights of Lithuania, Council 7 here in Waterbury, which has since increased to 70 members. And 3 weeks later after I joined that was the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So ever since, it's been an incredible journey, meeting some of the parishioners here, some of which were friends of my grandparents, from 60 years ago when my grandmother was going to St. Joseph's School. And in particular, Peter Versekis, who is of the first waiver lineage like myself, who decided to stay in his family house here in Brooklyn. Eric Bartkus, who moved to this neighborhood from Brooklyn, New York, and is invested in our community, as well as Tom and Mary Gludenis, friends of my grandparents, and also Tom, who's 93. His uncle married my great aunt, and she lived in the three family that that couple lives in now. Mary has another three family on Alder Street, of which there was an empty apartment unit late last summer. And with my invasive plant business, I really needed a second landing place in this side of the state because I live in far northwest rural Connecticut. And this is right at the intersection of two major highways. So it's very easy for me to get anywhere in the state. And I approached Mary through Peter Versekis, saying, I'd like to rent from you and be a part of this community down here part-time, but also it's leverage for my business. She agreed. We found some needs of renovation in that apartment, and we both decided to begin the process of renovating that apartment, which is now nearly complete. So you'll see that today. And it's incredible to be able to respect my heritage in a way that my ancestors never got the chance to. They were destitute here when they came to Waterbury.
In 1880?
1880s, yep.
1880s.
Before this church was built. And I respect the suffering that they had to endure to not only get here, but while they were here for the sake of my future existence. And so to be able to contribute here in a way that they never had the opportunity to is an immense honor for me. And I see it as a way to also show others like me who are partially Lithuanian that they could participate in this community and not just respect their heritage, but have a new, better quality of life for themselves in a enriching community.
It's very great to hear that, actually, and I hope this district will be reborn and there won't be people who say that we fear to come here anymore. Right. It's already getting better, I think, yeah. Yeah,
absolutely, and I have to say, I've come down here for 1.5 years and not one person has touched my truck. So I'm very happy with that. And when Mayor O'Leary, his administration has done an incredible job for the city and has been great for us to work with. When we were negotiating the sale of the parish center and the school to the city about 1 year ago, we met with him and we were very grateful that he accepted our ask to utilize the parish center for a Lithuanian museum. So we're looking forward to working with the city to install that in the former parish center chapel and advertise more about this neighborhood and that it is indeed a safe place to be. And when we were touring that parish center, I said to him, I was so happy that at that time it was only 6 months I had been here, that nobody has touched my truck. And he shook my hand and he said, nobody will ever touch your truck. You're safe here. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, it's great that even though some of the buildings are no longer controlled by Lithuanians, that there are plans to create this Lithuanian museum. I hope they will come to fruition. And every single Lithuanian building and monument here is marked on the Lithuanian heritage map at map.rulithuania.com, and explain that Encyclopedia of Lithuanian Heritage Sites Abroad at global.rulithuania.com. There are many more such sites in Connecticut, maybe not complete districts like this one, but many Lithuanian churches, Lithuanian monuments, and Lithuanian clubs. So I invite you to check the map and to learn more about Lithuanian heritage sites.